You're doing 70 on a dark highway. The white lines blur past like a heartbeat. Your phone is charged, your tank is full, your doors are locked. You feel safe. You shouldn't. Because out there in that vast American nowhere between cities, in those empty stretches where civilization thins to nothing, the rules change. The road stops being pavement and becomes something else. A membrane, a threshold, and sometimes without warning, you cross it. What you're about to hear are 7 true encounters. 7 moments when ordinary people realize that the open road isn't empty at all, that something watches the highways, that some vehicles never reach their destination, and some travelers, well, they arrive changed. These aren't accidents. Accidents have explanations. These are something worse. Story 1. The road that eats time. Liam thought he knew better than to trust technology completely. That's why, driving from Denver to LA in 2018, he kept both his phone GPS and an old Garmin unit on the dashboard. Belt and suspenders. Just outside Vegas, his phone died. No problem, he still had the Garmin. When the robotic voice suggested a scenic route that would save 20 minutes, Liam barely thought twice. He was tired. He wanted home. He took the turn. The pavement disappeared almost immediately. Asphalt became gravel, became dirt. But the GPS still showed the route, that reassuring blue line promising he'd rejoin the highway in minutes. Liam drove on. 40 minutes later, still on dirt, the Garmin screen stuttered. The voice, suddenly urgent, suddenly wrong, began repeating, "Turn around when safe. Turn around when safe. Turn around when safe." Liam pulled over. He unfolded his paper map with shaking hands. According to every source he had, he should have crossed the main highway 15 minutes ago, but there was nothing. Just endless desert and power lines stretching to infinity in both directions, their shadows cutting the moonlight into bars. That's when he saw it. A pickup truck, maybe 100 yards ahead, parked diagonally across the road, completely blocking his path. No lights, no movement, just sitting there like it had been waiting. Liam laid on his horn. The sound died in the empty air. He flashed his high beams. The truck didn't move. Then, in the spill of his headlights, he watched the tailgate slowly drop down. The hydraulics made no sound. The cab remained dark. No one got out. Liam's hand froze on the gear shift. Who parks in the middle of nowhere? Who drops their tailgate but doesn't get out? He waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. His breathing was the only sound in the universe. The truck just sat there, tailgate open like a mouth, swallowing his headlight beams. Liam made a decision. He threw the car into reverse and drove backward, blind, panicked, for over a mile, until he found a ditch wide enough to turn around in. He felt the suspension crack as he bounced through it, but he didn't care. He drove forward until he found pavement again, any pavement, and followed it until he saw lights that meant people and civilization and safety. When he finally stopped shaking enough to check his dashboard, he noticed something that made his blood turn to ice water. His gas gauge showed he'd burned through 3 hours of fuel. The clock agreed, but his memory insisted he'd been on that detour for 90 minutes, 2 hours maximum. The 20-minute shortcut had consumed half the night. He never saw the truck again. He tried later to find that turnoff on maps, satellite views, everything. It wasn't there. The road had vanished, if it ever existed at all. But Liam knows what happened. He'd driven into a fold in reality, a place where time pools and eddies like water. The truck wasn't there to stop him. It was there to mark the deepest point, to show him how far from the world he'd drifted. Some roads aren't meant to take you anywhere. They're meant to take you away. Story 2. The Samaritan Trap. Mara's mother always told her, "Help when you can, honey. You never know when you'll be the one who needs it." That's why, driving back from a business trip through a densely wooded stretch of highway, Mara pulled over when she saw the minivan with the flat tire. It was a nice vehicle, newer, clean. The woman standing beside it, Brenda, looked ordinary, tired, grateful when Mara stopped. "My phone's dead," Brenda said, a little too quickly. "The tow company says it'll be hours. Could you just drive me to the next town? There's a garage that can patch my spare." Something in Mara's gut whispered no, but her mother's voice was louder. She agreed. They left the minivan by the roadside and drove. For the first 10 minutes, Brenda made small talk. Then the questions started. "Are you traveling alone? Does anyone know you're on this road? When's someone expecting to hear from you?" Each question felt like a probe. Mara deflected, made up details, kept her hands steady on the wheel even as her heart began to hammer. Then Brenda pointed to a dirt road leading into the trees. "That's my town. Just pull in there." Mara slowed. Through the trees, she could see a single dilapidated trailer. No town, no lights, nothing that looked like civilization. "I thought you said," Brenda's mask fell away. Her voice dropped to something flat and cold. "You left your car with my husband, didn't you?" She smiled, and it was the worst smile Mara had ever seen. "He's probably done with that tire by now." The implication crashed over Mara like ice water. This was a setup. The flat tire was bait. Brenda was bait. And right now, someone was going through her car, taking inventory, seeing what could be stolen and what could be used. Mara slammed the accelerator to the floor. Brenda lunged for the steering wheel, but Mara shoved her back and kept driving. When they hit the next major town, Mara didn't slow down. She pulled up to a police station, shoved the still cursing Brenda out of the moving car, and drove away with her tires screaming. She called the state police from a gas station 20 miles down the road. When they recovered her vehicle, nothing was stolen, but the trunk was wide open. Her luggage had been carefully removed and placed on the grass beside the car. Arranged, displayed. The message was clear. "We could have taken everything. We let you go this time." Mara doesn't stop for stranded motorists anymore. She doesn't return waves. She's learned what her mother never had to, that predators study us. They know our decency is a weapon they can use against us. The road rewards the paranoid. It punishes the kind. Story 3. The Stone. Kyle was 18 hours into his drive home for the holidays. Exhausted, wired on gas station coffee, barely human. When he saw the rest stop, he nearly wept with relief. He locked his car, he was certain he locked it, and stumbled into the restroom. Less than 2 minutes. He splashed water on his face, used the facilities, and came back out. That's when he saw it. A smooth river stone, about the size of a silver dollar, resting perfectly centered on his driver's seat. Kyle stopped walking. It hadn't been there. He'd locked the doors. Both doors were still locked. He checked, hands shaking, 3 times. The windows were up. Nothing else was disturbed. Just the stone, waiting for him like a calling card. He looked around the parking lot, empty except for one semi-truck on the far side, driver probably asleep. The rest stop lights hummed. Everything looked normal. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking as he unlocked the door and picked up the stone. It was cold, smooth, ordinary. He threw it into the bushes and got back in his car. As he was pulling out of the parking spot, his headlights swept across the recycling area near the building entrance. That's when he saw him. A man, completely still, standing in the shadow of the dumpster, holding a large camera with a telephoto lens pointed directly at Kyle's car, not taking a picture, just watching. The lens fixed on Kyle like an unblinking eye. Kyle didn't think. He floored it, tires shrieking, and didn't stop for an hour. Didn't slow down until he hit city lights and traffic and people. Later, much later, when he could breathe again, he Googled his car model and found the forum posts, the warnings. His year and make had a known vulnerability. The door locks could be bypassed silently with basic tools. Takes 30 seconds if you know what you're doing. The stone wasn't theft. The stone was a message. I was inside your car. I could have been in your back seat. I could have been waiting. But I want you to know I was there. I want you to imagine what I could have done. Kyle sold that car the next month. He couldn't sit in it anymore without feeling watched. Because he had been. Someone had studied him, chosen him, entered his private space to deliver a message. You are not safe. You were never safe. And I know exactly how vulnerable you are. Story 4. The woman who watched Sam and Chloe were driving through eastern Oregon, that endless stretch where the sky presses down and the road goes straight to the horizon. They hadn't seen another car in over an hour. They were laughing about something stupid when Chloe suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "Who is that?" Up ahead, sitting on an old-fashioned suitcase by the side of the road, was a woman. She wore a heavy wool coat despite the summer heat. She faced away from them, staring at nothing, just empty road ahead and empty desert beyond. Sam slowed down. "Should we?" "Something's wrong," Chloe whispered. But Sam was already pulling alongside. As they passed, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman had rotated on the suitcase to face their car. Not stood up, not turned, rotated, like she was on a lazy Susan, or her lower body remaining perfectly still while her torso twisted to track their vehicle. Her face was slack, expressionless. Her eyes were wide and didn't blink. "Drive!" Chloe said. "Drive, drive, drive!" Sam pressed the accelerator. Chloe was crying, a thin, whimpering sound she couldn't stop. 5 minutes later, they rounded a gentle curve. The woman was there again. Same suitcase, same coat, same position, facing away from the road like she'd never moved. But they'd been driving at 70 miles an hour. She should have been miles behind them. "That's impossible," Sam said, but his voice shook. "That's not." This time, they didn't slow down. Chloe covered her eyes. Sam watched the mirror, waiting for that horrible rotation again, but they passed too quickly. They drove in silence for 3 hours after that, taking turns watching the road behind them, terrified they'd see her a third time. They never did. But Sam still has nightmares about that rotation. The way her spine twisted while her hips stayed planted, the emptiness of her expression, the certainty, the knowledge that whatever was wearing that woman's face knew exactly what would frighten them most. Some things you see on the road aren't ghosts. There's something worse. They're things that exist outside the normal flow of space and time. And when you encounter them, you've temporarily slipped into their reality. The question is, did they pull you in, or did you wander there on your own? Story 5. The Offering. Mia was a practical person. Logical. She didn't believe in anything she couldn't explain. That's why when she pulled up to the toll booth at midnight and the arm wouldn't lift, her first reaction was annoyance, not fear. The screen flashed. Amount due, $0. But the gate stayed down. She pressed the help button. Then a voice, robotic, synthesized, wrong. "The system requires an offering." Mia blinked. "What?" The voice repeated, exactly the same inflection. "The system requires an offering." This had to be a prank, some bored attendant messing with late-night drivers. She pressed the button again, ready to give them a piece of her mind. "The system requires an offering." Mia looked around. The other toll lanes were dark. Not just closed. Dark, no lights, no signs of power. Her car was trapped in a concrete channel barely wider than her vehicle. She couldn't reverse. Someone had pulled in behind her. Or she looked in her mirror. There was no one behind her. The lane stretched empty back into darkness. Her hands started to sweat. "Look, I need to get through," she said to the speaker. "What do you want?" Silence, long enough that she thought the system had shut down. Then, "The system requires an offering." In desperation, Mia grabbed her center console. Loose change, old receipts, a parking stub, and there at the bottom, a tarnished gold locket she'd been meaning to donate. An ex had given it to her years ago. She looked at the locket, looked at the toll slot. This is insane. But she dropped it in anyway. The machine whirred. She heard the locket clatter down through the mechanism, falling into depths that went deeper than they should. Then, offering accepted. The arm lifted. The lights came back on. All the lanes, all at once, like someone had thrown a master switch. Mia drove through, hands locked on the steering wheel. In her rearview mirror, she watched the arm slam down the instant she passed. Then every light in the toll plaza went dark again. She drove until dawn before she felt safe enough to stop. When she checked her bank account the next day, there was a pending charge, $1 to the Gatekeeper LLC. She Googled the company. It didn't exist. But Mia knows what happened. Something had claimed that toll booth, had made it into a checkpoint, a place where the normal rules of transaction were replaced with something older, something that wanted proof you were willing to sacrifice to pass. The locket wasn't payment. It was a test, and she's terrified to think about what would have happened if she'd failed. Story 6, The Night That Wasn't. Josh and Danny were experienced campers. They knew what they were doing when they pulled off onto an unmarked fire road deep in a national forest. They'd camp here, get an early start on the trail tomorrow. They set up the tent, built a fire, cooked dinner. Everything was perfect. At 4 a.m., they both woke to the same sound. Thump, thump, thump. Rhythmic, deliberate, coming from the dense woods behind the tent. It was too steady to be an animal, too purposeful to be branches and wind. Thump, thump, thump. They lay there not breathing for 45 seconds. Then it stopped. "Pack up," Josh whispered. "Now." They stuffed everything into the car with shaking hands. The pre-dawn light was just beginning to gray the sky. Josh went to kick dirt over the fire pit. There was no fire pit. The ground where they built the fire was undisturbed. Pine needles lay in a perfect blanket. No ash, no disturbed soil, no evidence of flames. Maybe it's over here, Danny said, but his voice was thin. They searched. The tent had been right there. They could both see the spot, could remember exactly where they'd staked it. But the undergrowth was thick and untouched. No flattened grass, no footprints, no sign that two adult men in a tent had spent the night there. "Get in the car," Josh said. They drove out, following the fire road back to the paved highway. When they reached it, Josh looked at his watch. 5 a.m. They'd woken at 4, packed up, searched the area. An hour, maybe a little more. Made sense. But the dashboard clock, the one that synced with satellites, that couldn't be manually adjusted, read 6:45 a.m. They'd lost 2 hours. The physical evidence of their camp was gone, but the memory remained, crystal clear. Both of them remembered the same details: the smell of pine smoke, the taste of instant coffee, the sound of that rhythmic thumping that had sent them fleeing. It happened. They know it happened. But the forest had reached out and erased the proof, had taken those hours and removed them from the timeline, had kept the memory but destroyed the evidence. Why? Neither of them knows. But Danny said something later that Josh thinks about every night. What if we never left? What if the real us is still there and we're just the memory driving away? Josh doesn't camp anymore. Story 7. The billboards know. Eve had driven between home and school dozens of times. The route through Kansas was boring, flat, endless. She knew every exit, every landmark. That's why she noticed when something changed. The first billboard advertised a long-defunct diner, its paint peeling. But in the bottom corner, someone had spray-painted a name in fresh red letters. Ava. Her middle name. Eve's hands tightened on the wheel. Coincidence. It was a common name. She kept driving. 10 miles later, another old billboard, this one for tractor parts. More graffiti, same red paint, same style. Jensen. Her grandmother's maiden name. The one she used as her security question for banking. The one almost nobody knew. Eve's mouth went dry. 5 miles later, she saw it. A completely blank billboard, its advertisement long since blown away. But in the center, freshly painted in letters 6 feet tall. Get out of the red car. Eve was driving her red Honda Civic, the only red car she'd seen in the last hour. She called her brother with shaking hands, told him everything. He told her to get to the nearest populated area and wait. That's when she checked her rearview mirror and saw it. A dark sedan with tinted windows, maybe a quarter-mile back, matching her speed exactly. Had it been there before? She couldn't remember. She pressed the accelerator to 90. The sedan kept pace. She didn't stop until she reached a massive truck stop, where she abandoned her car among dozens of RVs and sprinted inside. She stayed in the crowded restaurant until her brother arrived 2 hours later. They went out together to get the car. On the windshield, tucked under the wiper, was a business card, blank white cardstock. No text, just 3 words in that same red spray paint. Next time, Ava. Eve never drove that route again. She sold the car. She changed all her security questions. She moved to a new address and didn't tell anyone for a month because she understood what had happened. Someone had harvested her digital life, her social media, her public records, her password recovery questions. They'd weaponized her information, turned her own data into a stalking tool. The billboards were a countdown, a game. We know who you are. We know where you are. We know what you call yourself when you think nobody's watching. The highway had stopped being public space. It had become a hunting ground where your digital shadow is visible to anyone who knows how to look. Eve got lucky. The billboards warned her just in time. But she thinks about that business card sometimes, the promise it contained. Next time, 7 stories, 7 highways, 7 moments when the road stopped being pavement and became something else. Maybe they were targeted. Maybe they were random. Maybe they simply traveled through a weak spot in reality, a place where the membrane between safe and not safe grows thin. Or maybe the highway has always been this way, and we're only just now starting to admit it. The ancient Romans built their roads straight because they believed evil spirits could only travel in curves. Modern highways ignore this. They bend and wind through empty country, and we drive them alone at night, Believing our GPS and our locks and our rational minds will keep us safe. But the people in these stories learn different. They learn that safety is an illusion, that privacy can be violated without leaving a trace, that time and space don't behave the way we pretend they do, that someone or something is always watching the roads, looking for the vulnerable, the alone, the unlucky. You're probably watching this in a safe place. Warm light, Wi-Fi, doors that lock. But eventually you'll drive somewhere, late at night alone, and you'll pass through that empty stretch where your phone loses signal and the streetlights stop, and there's nothing but darkness and white lines and the memory of these stories. That's when you'll understand. The highway isn't empty. It never was. It's just very good at hiding what lives there. Tell us in the comments, what's the most unexplainable thing you've encountered on a lonely road at night? What made you realize you weren't as alone as you thought? If this made you think twice about your next road trip, hit subscribe. We're mapping the places the GPS won't take you. Drive safe, or better yet, don't drive at all.